But by the end of the 1980s, the market had shifted really dramatically because of the arrival of Nintendo. And they had a very, very different business model, which has proven over the last 30 years to not really be very healthy for developers. And that business model is that the platform is not an open platform like the World Wide Web or the printed book or even a very low-cost platform like DVDs and CDs and floppy disks and audio cassette tapes. And there's been quite a legacy of big platforms. I would even include broadcast television as being somewhat this way, where there are often government standards that are just freely available, or it's a consortium of companies that get together and agree on a standard, and they make it very inexpensive for everybody to use it. Then Nintendo came along, and they actually copied something that IBM was doing back in the 1960s. So nobody was really allowed to know how everything worked on the inside. And if you wanted to actually make something, you had to go do business with the platform owner, get their permission, and sign a license agreement. And the license agreements always had all kinds of sharp teeth that would bite you, but you really had no choice.
Yeah, just so many hoops to jump through.
Yeah, and by the way, nobody in America or Europe wanted Nintendo to succeed, and they did anyway. And of course, they succeeded because they didn't have a storage device, and they had a pretty decent 8-bit machine that, because they didn't have to have a floppy disk or some other form of storage, that manufacturing cost was lower. And because of their razor blade model, they were willing to lose a little money on the hardware. So here you had a machine like the NES, also known as the Famicom in markets like Japan, and it cost basically $100 at a time when home computers like the Apple II cost over $1,000.
Well, because I know with like Nintendo, they kind of went more of a, kind of promoting it almost more like a toy as opposed to like a high-tech computer kind of thing.
Yeah, and because of the licensing model, you had to pretty much make games that fit their marketing messaging. So, for example, you never saw a lot of educational software for any Nintendo platform because that's not how they marketed it. And because they were charging really high license fees, and if it was a cartridge that had to be manufactured, that was very expensive. And so it wasn't really practical to take risks trying to explore new markets the way you can. If you look at the World Wide Web, everything's being explored.
Right.
And that's because it's much lower risk. And that's good for humanity when creative people have that kind of latitude. So I was not a fan of what Nintendo was going to do, and I'm still not a fan. And I'm particularly not a fan of companies like Apple deciding to adopt the same model. It's very problematic. And in case you haven't noticed, there are people like Epic disrupting this model now with the Epic Game Store for Android. And, even Steam on the PC is a bit of a disruptor, but Epic has a lower royalty rate on the PC games than they do. So anyway, things are changing. I think this is important, again, if you want to be able to support and enable developers and creativity and innovation in the software, you've got to make it more financially feasible. But of course, Apple's never suffered from having enough developers because they disrupted the supply chain by basically telling all the developers, oh, you don't need a publisher. We've got a store.
Right.
Of course, that's kind of misleading. Because once you have millions of apps, you can't just go in the store and stumble into something the way you would at Walmart. Anyway, to get back to your question, that was a big digression.
Yeah, it was a good rant, though, for sure. Yeah.